Okay, so before we proceed with the items on the agenda, I need to remind you of the usual housekeeping messages. There are no fire alarm tests planned for this evening, so if the fire alarm sounds, please leave the chamber by the nearest door. Then follow the illuminated fire exit signs and assemble in the car park at the rear of the building. Would you all please ensure that your mobile phones and tablet devices are on silent mode? And also a gentle reminder about appropriate behaviour within the council chamber. We ask that everyone respect councillors and officers when business is being carried out. If a member of the public interrupts the proceedings, I shall intervene accordingly. You have the right to film this meeting if you wish, but I would like to know before we begin whether anyone within the room wishes to do this. If you intend to film the meeting or part of it, would you please indicate now? Okay, so the first item on this evening's agenda is apologies for absence. We have received apologies from Councillors Sorensen and C. Stevenson. Are there any more apologies to be submitted? Thank you. So the next item on the agenda is confirmation of minutes. Can I have a proposal that the minutes of the council meeting held on the 28th of November 2024 be approved as a correct record? Thank you. Does anyone want to comment on the factuality of the minutes or propose an amendment? Okay. So those members who are present at the 28th of November meeting who are in favour of confirming the minutes as a correct record, please clearly indicate. Okay. The minutes of the 28th of November meeting are confirmed. The next item on the agenda is item 3, declarations of interest. I need to remind you that on the 16th of March 2023, the Standards Committee passed a resolution granting a dispensation to all councillors to participate and vote on the setting of the council's LCTS for the purposes of the Local Government Finance Act 2012 on the grounds that it is in the interests of persons living within the borough for as many members as possible to be able to debate and decide on the issue. Councillors do not therefore need to declare an interest in agenda item 8 just because they receive localised council tax support. On that basis, do any members or officers have any interest to declare on any items included on the agenda? The next item is item 4, announcements. I'm very pleased to announce that Thornton YMCA Leisure Centre Run and Wyre Borough Council are finalists in the new APS? Performance Network's Best Most Popular Improved Performer Awards in the Sports and Leisure Facility Management category for Thornton YMCA. I would like to present the award to the Leisure, Health and Community Engagement Portfolio holder, Councillor Bowen, and thank our Health and Lifestyles and Committees team and the YMCA for all their hard work. I'd also like to update the members on my Mayor's Ball, which is due to go ahead now on Friday the 21st of March 2025 at 7 o'clock at the venue in Cleveley's. It's an 80s theme night still, we just had to change venues. So I will get some information regarding tickets out shortly, and I'm sure you'd all like to don the leg warmers to come and support the event. I thought you were. We have no public questions or questions from councillors, so we will move on to item 7, which is executive reports. A polite reminder that each speaker has 3 minutes only, and there will be 10 allocated for questions and comments for each executive report. Please clearly indicate by raising your hand if you wish to speak. Please also note that I may refuse supplementary questions in order to ensure as many different members as possible are able to ask questions or make a comment within the 10 minutes allocated. So first of all, I have the report for the Leader of the Council. Councillor Vincent, would you please introduce your report?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just to further update members with regards to PFOA, it's very much as per the report. We obviously got the results back quite recently to confirm that all 22 sites that were tested had higher than desirable levels of PFOA. That then gives us the evidence that we needed, I suppose, to write to the Secretary of State and ask for a moratorium on development in that area, which I think is sensible. We can't defer planning applications. There are things we can do and we are doing, which is ask for more detailed scientific testing and contaminated land investigations from any developer. But there are sites within the local plan within that kilometre from the emission spot. So I think it's appropriate that we do have that moratorium, but if we don't determine planning applications, we could have costs against us on appeal and lose them on non-determination grounds. So I just think that's a sensible solution, and hopefully the Secretary of State will respond and agree. One of the things that we are trying to get for residents to make them feel more comfortable is some clearer and better health advice on what the actual risk from this stuff is. We know that the advice has been, if you grow fruit and vegetables in the ground, don't eat too many of them, and if you do eat them, wash them carefully, but that's quite standard advice. Now, my understanding, this is just my understanding from the very scientific advice that's out there that I've seen, is that's because now that the stuff isn't being emitted, the risk comes from if you eat it or if you consume it. So if you do gardening and you don't wash your hands or whatever it is. So the ongoing risk appears to be low to residents, but we need another authority to give us that advice before we can clearly communicate it. So we're pushing for that, and we're pushing for the phase 2 sites to be identified as soon as possible, because people will want to know where that is. Just to be clear, that's likely to be planned by the EA based on a scientific grid. It will also involve testing on some private properties owned by residents even, because they're going to be quite specific on where they want to take samples on, having plotted the sites on some pretty scientific calculations that I'll never understand. So it's important that we also obtain that access for them, and we'll be writing to any landowners once we know the sites, etc. So we're on with that to make sure the letters are ready to go. So we're doing our prep, we aren't just sitting and waiting, but right now pushing it like we want it to be pushed and progressing it like we want it to progress is in the hands of the EA, and so we wait to hear back from them. With regards to local government reorganisation, since the white paper and the various statements that were made following that, and the various briefings where it changes, then it goes back, and then it changes again, we've not heard much from government for a while, because there's a letter coming. When that letter arrives, I will circulate it and we will make you aware of it, because that letter will basically set out what the requirements are for the new authority. So at the moment we know some very basic facts, such as realistically they've got to border each other and they've got to be more than 500,000 people, and we think they can't be over 1 million people, but that's not been made crystal clear because that's not in the white paper. So we just need some clarity from government on what those rules will be before we can start thinking about what's best for Wyre. Other than that, Madam Mayor, I'm happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions or comments for Councillor Vincent? Councillor Fail.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In Para 3.9 it states that all councils should work together to develop unitary proposals. What action will this council be taking to help develop unitary proposals?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We'll wait for the letter, because all these plans that are going out there at the minute, none of the ones I've seen reach 500,000 people, and the government have said they have to reach 500,000 people other than exceptional circumstances. Now, it feels to me like the plans that are out there so far are very much, it's exceptional circumstances because I would like this to be my authority, rather than there being any justifiable reason for it. I've heard various plans, including a plan that sees Wyre go I don't know where, but Blackpool, Fylde and Preston go as one unitary. I've heard about Lancaster, Preston and Ribble Valley. There's all sorts of stuff, and people are nicking places to try and join other places together because they think they like the maths of it, and then not thinking about what happens to the rest of Lancashire that's left out. There's no sense in coming up with a plan like that. If it has to be 500,000 people or more, which it appears that it does, there's not a huge amount of scope to manoeuvre. It's quite clear that the Fylde coast comes as one. It's quite clear that if the Fylde coast comes at one, where does Lancaster go if not here? Really, the questions are for government, is there a million person cap? If there is, then it can't be one, because there's 1.5 million people in Lancashire. So the question for the authorities that has to be answered first, if £500,000 is the minimum number, is do you want 2 or 3? Because if you want 2, there's only really 2 options, and it's north, south, east, west. Or if you want 3, really you've got your cluster in the south of South Ribble, Chorley, West Lancs. You've got the east, and you've got the Fylde Coast and Lancaster. So all there is to be decided is where does Preston go, where does Lancaster go, and where does Ribble Valley go? Well, those questions answer themselves, really, because if Lancaster doesn't come in with us, then we're too small. And if Preston doesn't go in with the south, then the south is too small. So really, if you go with 3, the question is, what happens to Ribble Valley? So while we do have to work together on this, as long as everybody accepts what the rules are, really it's going to be a case of authorities that want 3, which is my preference, that have to work together to join together with a plan and make the case for 3. We have to wait and see what the county want, because they will have a huge say in this. You know, I don't know what they want, and I don't know if they've decided that yet, and they're proceeding with elections, so it's kind of irrelevant till May what they want anyway. But obviously, when we get the rules from government, we will start looking at what our proposal would be. We will start talking to district leaders at the district leaders meetings and try and find out how many of them are planning on coming up with sensible proposals and how many of them are going to keep coming up with proposals for 4, 5 and 6 unitaries because that's what they fancy. We won't work with those people because there's no point. The people that want to be sensible and want to come up with sensible plans that might actually get action to keep some control over this, we will work with.
Thank you, Councillor Vincent. Councillor Rimmer.
I went to the drop-in today at Thornton Football Club about the historic contamination. It was really useful, informative as usual. Thank you very much. Also, good news about the letter on the moratorium. I understand that this is about new planning permission, and I wondered if you could give us some more details about the approach for housing that's been recently passed. And also if there'd be more detailed briefings for councillors, now we have more information. Thank you.
So there's not much more detail to brief you on other than what you already have. When more information comes out, obviously we've got the pre-council session planned, that will be more detailed, and when we get more information we will provide it. You know, we're making sure that everything is going out to councillors as soon as it goes out to residents, and that's as soon as we can release it. We get information in, we want to release it that day, but we have to sometimes wait on partners to approve it and sign off on the wording and things. So in terms of more detailed information, you'll get it as soon as we're allowed to give it you. In terms of the existing applications, that's more difficult because they've already been passed, so you can't now start applying conditions that haven't already been attached. So in terms of the development that's already passed, it unfortunately is passed and it's beyond our control now. We can only do things about future applications.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Minto.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is just an update. I also attended the Thornton Football Club this afternoon, and the Environmental Agency has informed me, much to everybody's disdain, because they all think that they're hiding something, and in fact the produce that they're testing has now been sent to Germany. So we're waiting for it to come back from Germany with the results of an independent review. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Vincent. Councillor Wells.
Thank you. Councillor Rimmer did pick up on the first part of the question, but we also wanted to support the letter. We do feel it's the right thing to do, given the concern of residents. And I think just to expand on the question from Councillor Rimmer regarding what's been going to be done for previous planning applications, we're particularly interested in the Bourne Road development, which actually sits on the threshold of the publication from 2024, which actually stipulated that the contaminant that's been investigated was actually a serious concern. So we just wondered if you've got any further details specifically about the Bourne Road development. Thank you.
It's more of a technical planning question, so I think it's better for me to sort of let Steve Smith respond to you on that.
Councillor Stevenson.
I'm obliged to you, Madam Mayor. Page 16, item 3.9. I'd like to start off by saying, Councillor Vincent, I think it would appropriate to quote a bit of Shakespeare. I think to be or not to be, that is the question, is very appropriate. And I'm trying to work out, when I read your reply, how long is a piece of string? I'm just trying to work out how long it is.
Just like that.
Right. Now, I'm quite sure you're not trying to throw a spanner in the clockwork by delaying everything. I'm pretty certain that you're not, but you never know. Now, you say in your letter, page 20, do you not, that it will only, we'll bring it to that there, it will only cause a slight delay, what you're proposing. That's fine, but on what authority have you based that statement on? I assume that you obtained that advice from professional people. You haven't just plucked it out the air and thought, well, Michael thinks this, and that's what it is, and that's what's going to happen. They really want to know, do you really sincerely believe that it's only going to take a short time? So, I'm just looking forward to your reply, Michael. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If you read the rest of the sentence, Councillor Stevenson, it says, should the land not be deemed to be contaminated. So what the full sentence says is that it will only cause a slight delay if the land isn't contaminated. That's just correct, because if the land comes back and we don't have to issue a contaminated land notice, then development can go ahead, because that's what planning law says. It's just basic. So no, I didn't get any professional advice on it because I didn't need it.
Thank you. Thank you. That concludes the consideration of the Leader's report. We will now move on to the report of the Resources Portfolio Holder. Councillor Mackay, would you please introduce your report?
Councillor Mackay is currently enjoying life as an accountant in January, Madam Mayor, so she is
fantastic.
Not here.
Okay.
I will happy to take any questions, but I only found out we're delivering this at about 3 o'clock.
Are there any questions? Councillor Belshaw.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I doubt you're going to know, but I was just wondering, she did say she would be giving us an update today on to whether the Poulton and Fleetwood baths have been done, completed, the work on them.
The works in the swimming pools in Poulton, and so I can definitely tell you that the Poulton baths have been done, and because they were filling it on Wednesday when I asked, and Fleetwood, I don't know.
Yes, Fleetwood.
Yeah. Yes, Fleetwood's. There you go.
Thank you. Now that concludes the consideration of the Resources Portfolio Holders report. We will now move on to the report of the Street Scene, Parks and Open Spaces Portfolio Holder. Councillor Bridge, are you here? Would you please introduce your report?
No, I'm not an accountant. I pay somebody to do it for me. The report's in front of you. Any questions, please ask.
Councillor Minto.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can you give us an update on the building or the rebuilding of the path along the Wyre from Stanner to Skip Hill? Thank you.
Well, it's underway. It's started. I mean, I walk my dog round there regularly. I get it. Even in Welly, sometimes it's impassable. We've started it, building it up, making it safer, make it more friendly for prams as well, and people in chairs, chair users. We're cracking on.
Councillor Wells.
Last year we were a bit concerned about the progress. like to revisit that piece of work? Thank you.
I actually had a meeting about that about half an hour ago. So, all I can say is watch this space, but obviously we're on it because I met about it tonight, but I will let you know soonest. All right, okay.
Thank you. That concludes the consideration of the Street Scene, Parks and Open Spaces Portfolio Holders Report. We will now move on to the report of the Planning, Policy and Economic Development Portfolio Holder. Councillor Marinell, would you please introduce your report?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Reports before members. Quite happy to take questions. Thank you.
Are there any questions or comments for Councillor Marinell? Councillor Fayle.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If you weren't expecting this question, you probably should have been, because it feels like Groundhog Day to me, this. The authority's monitoring report for 21-22 stated that of 749 house completions, there was under provision of 1, 2 and 3 bed houses, but a massive over provision of 4 bed houses. The authority's monitoring report for 22-23 stated that of 719 house completions, there was an under provision of 2 and 3 bed houses, but a large over provision of 4 bed houses. The most recent authority's monitoring report for 23-24 states that of 663 house completions, there was again an under provision of 2 and 3 bed houses, but a large over provision of 4 bed houses. Do you agree that Wyre needs to stop developers delivering a housing mix that residents simply don't need, and instead take steps to ensure that the housing delivered is based on the demand by Wyre residents and not a housing mix based on the profit margins of developers? Thank you.
Councillor Marinell, would you please respond?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. When I was on planning for the 4 years, I had this conversation with the previous officer, head of planning on many occasions, as all the members in here who was on planning with me at that time will testify to. It's something I used to go on about all the time, and what annoyed me about it was the fact that the percentages that were written down were never really stuck to, and they were sort of flexible. Since Steve Smith's come in, we've done a new policy, as you've probably seen. We do stick far more to what's going on now, to the percentages that are there, and I think it's a good thing that we do stick to the percentages that are there, because I do want to see some more 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms coming forward, because they are needed, like you say, so yes.
Councillor Fayle?
Just, it's getting better, but we're not sticking to it. The 2 and 3 bedroomed houses are still underprovided, and it's always the 4 bedroomed houses that are overprovided, and that is where the profit margins are. Clearly, I'm sure maybe one member in this council might be able to shed some more light on this, but I suspect the profit margins are in the 4 bed houses, and that's why we're not delivering the 1, 2, 3 bedroomed houses that we should be delivering. Thank you.
Hopefully going forward you'll see a change, so that's what I want to see as well, so, and I push for that all the time.
Thank you. That concludes the consideration of the Planning, Policy and Economic Development Portfolio Holder Report. We will now move on to the report of the Neighbourhood Services and Community Safety Portfolio Holder. Councillor Berry, would you please introduce your report?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My report's before members. I'll do my best to answer any questions.
Are there any questions for Councillor Berry? Councillor Fayle?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. From previous reports, there is obviously some good work being undertaken to prevent alcohol-related harm amongst young people. Can I ask what work, if any, is being undertaken or planned by Wyre officers with regard to vaping? I'm thinking particularly of the need to tackle illegal and dangerous vapes and the selling of vapes to underage people.
Councillor Berry, would you please respond?
There are regular checks on people selling vapes made to see if there's any underage selling. That takes place. If a shop is found to be wanting, then they are warned, and if they still continue on a further test, then they will be told to stop selling. It's as simple as that. We're testing as much as we can do through the Agency of Trading Standards, and the police accompany them as well.
Thank you. Councillor Swatton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll be nice to you again this time, Barry. I was wondering if you could give a bit more of a verbal update in regards to the homelessness situation that's underway and the work you're doing in Fleetwood. Thank you.
I think it's a regular thing that our officers are monitoring and answering any calls that a homeless person is seen to be on the streets. They've always done that. I think the problem has been that whilst accommodation has been found for certain people, they do have social issues and social problems. When they go into the accommodation that has been found from them, sadly, they cannot abide by the straightforward rules that they should do, and the landlord has been forced to ask them to leave. We've tried to accommodate people once or twice, but they still, sadly, not observe the rules. The question, therefore, is what can we do we do our best to put some of these people through drug and alcohol services. The further question, I think, is being mentioned in my report, is that we're trying to see what further we can do for people who just will not go into accommodation. And I think, obviously, we've had the sad case in Fleetwood, which obviously we don't want to be repeated. So we're doing our utmost to try and help these people and to find out the reasons why they won't seek accommodation and try and work with them through various agencies.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Berry. That concludes the consideration of the Neighbourhood Services and Community Safety Portfolio Holders Report. We will now move on to the report of the Leisure, Health and Community Engagement Portfolio Holder. Councillor Bowen, would you please introduce your report?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My report's before you, but I just want to add how thrilled I am that we've got this recognition for the Thornton Leisure Centre. It's richly deserved, and I'd just like to thank all the staff from the YMCA that work there, and also the staff at the council offices. Richly deserved. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fail.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Regarding the action taken against the Cleveley's restaurant, it never ceases to amaze me that we've still got restaurant owners showing a total disregard for food standards. I'm sure all councillors are grateful for the work of our environmental health team in helping to protect the public and trying to drive up food standards. I took a walk down Victoria Road yesterday and was disappointed to see this establishment and many others not displaying a food standards rating. In Wales and Northern Ireland, it is mandatory to display their current food hygiene ratings. A 2017 food hygiene task group required the leader and the chief exec to write to the government requesting legislation was brought in England at the earliest opportunity. Well, here we are 8 years later, and the public's health continues to be put in jeopardy by people not fit to run a food business. With a new government now in place, can I ask the portfolio holder if she would liaise with the leader and the chief exec and arrange for yet another letter to be sent to the government asking them to take the urgent action that is now well overdue. Such a letter could cite examples of the action the council has had to take in recent years. I agree, but she's not a member of the government.
Councillor Bowen, could you please respond?
Yeah, we have written to the government on several occasions, this government and the last government, but unfortunately we never seem to get a reply. But like the leader said, perhaps you could ask ask your colleague if she can do anything about it.
I shall let myself.
Councillor Molyneux, thank you.
Can I ask, Councillor Bowen, is there anything going to be done about bringing in mandatory training? Because I did find out that there is no people do not have to have the certificates. They're relying on the owners of establishments training the staff, and the owners of the establishments have probably not got enough training to train those members of staff. So this is where it's falling down, and you can't expect that these businesses are going to keep up with their hygiene, with everything else that's got to be kept up in businesses, food businesses, and keep the public safe, if the actual training isn't done, in-house training or training within the Wyre Borough here in the council offices to train these people. Is anything at all being done on this?
Yeah, they do have to have training, and they do have to pass a test and have a certificate to be able to work with food. The council does do spot checks all the time on food premises. If they find anything wrong, then they go back again until it's been put right. But yeah, they do have to have it. It's mandatory to have the training. Unfortunately, like Councillor Fell said, it's not mandatory to put how many stars they've got. So if they've only got 1 star, they don't have to advertise that. Obviously they won't. But we do try our hardest to keep standards up. And there's so many food outlets now in Wyre, but yeah, we do try very hard to keep the standards up and keep the public safe.
Thank you, Councillor Bowen. That concludes the consideration of the Leisure, Health and Community Engagement Portfolio Holders Report. Now is the opportunity for members of the Cabinet to make comments or ask questions on the reports of their colleagues. Do any Cabinet members wish to do so? That concludes the consideration of the executive reports. We will now move on to the agenda item 8, which is localised council tax support scheme for 25-26. Councillor Vincent, would you please introduce the report and propose the recommendation?
Happy to propose a report, Madam Mayor, and take any questions.
Are there any comments, questions or amendments? Sorry. Is there a seconder for the... Are there any comments, questions or amendments? Would members please now vote on the recommendation? Those in favour, please show. That's unanimous. The recommendations are approved. The next item is item 11, Gambling Act Statement of Gambling Policy.
Oh no.
Is it?
Sorry.
Is it? Yeah.
We're down, sorry.
So we've gone too many. So this is 9. Sorry, so the next item is item 9, compulsory review of polling districts and polling places within the Borough of Wyre. Councillor Vincent, would you please introduce the report and propose the recommendation?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've spoken to Councillor Fale, and we've, I believe, agreed, subject to confirming that and seconding it. Polling stations are obviously very important, and there are 2 wards in particular which are quite large wards, where there are proposals to remove mobile units, which, while we understand that we need to save money, because we do need to try and save money, that actually the amount of money that we're saving and the impact that that would have on the electorate would be disproportionate. So I will propose that with Hardhorn and High Cross, that WH3 is not moved to Baines and that it remains as the mobile unit fronting 102 and 104 Normoss Road, Poulton-le-Fylde, and that in Rossall Ward, WD2 and 3 again remain as the mobile unit in the current location on the corner of Broadway. Now, in both cases, the report says that alternatives are being explored. I'm more than happy for those explorations to continue, and if in Hardhorn and High Cross the pub and or the financial advisor is able to come back and let us use those premises, then great, we can bring that amendment forward to another council meeting, and the same applies in Rossall Ward. With Fleetwood High School or Lighthouse View come forward, that's fine, but ultimately the proposal in Rossall Ward to move it outside of Rossall Ward I don't think is acceptable.
So is there a seconder for the proposal? For the amendments?
Firstly, though, on behalf of the Labour Group, I'd like to thank the Returning Officer and the Electoral Service team for all their hard work on the review of polling places. I think we all appreciate the wish not to have to use mobile polling stations, but we also have to recognise that it may turn out that there is no reasonable alternative. It's also appreciated that for a number of wards it's a case of work in progress, and although the investigations into finding an appropriate polling station might turn out perfectly well, equally they might not. The current proposal of having Rossall polling station in neighbouring Park ward isn't appropriate. It would be confusing to the electorate and involve significant distance to travel. We must make every effort to encourage the electorate to vote and not put barriers up. As such, it seems appropriate to approve the proposals, but with a couple of conditions added. If we don't do that, councillors could be approving something that turns out to be detrimental to the electorate. So, roughly in terms of what Councillor Vincent was saying, this is what the Labour Group were going to propose, something along these lines, that the proposals contain, this is 3.1, that the proposals contained with the Returning Officer's report attached at Appendix 1 be approved, with the exception that, 1, Rossall, the proposed polling station in Rossall Ward polling districts WD2 and WD3 be changed from the Lounge, Fleetwood Cricket Club and Sports Club, Fleetwood Road, Broadwater, Fleetwood, to, in order of preference, either Fleetwood High School, where it used to be, or the Lighthouse View, Regenda, or, if they are not possible, to a mobile unit at the junction of Broadway and Chatsworth. And 2, with Hardhorn with Highcross, the polling place in Hardhorn with Highcross Ward polling district WH3 be changed from Baines School, Highcross Road, Poulton-le-Fylde, to a mobile unit at land fronting 102 and 104 Normus Road, Poulton-le-Fylde, while we continue to look for a suitable alternative polling place within the ward, which is what Councillor Vincent was referring to with regard to the pub and other premises which I can't recall.
All I would say is that I personally think that the wording for your amendment for Hardhorn with Highcross is better, in that it says it will be a mobile unit unless you can find us an alternative, rather than it should be A, B and then C, which is the wording for the Rossall Ward one. So I would effectively propose that the amendment for Rossall be the proposed polling station be the mobile unit at junction of Broadway and Chatsworth, and that we continue to explore the other options. And obviously, if an amendment needs to come forward to council, it will need to come forward. Well, it'd be at the junction of Broadway and Chatsworth, yeah, within the ward. Yeah, the other options named in the report then, because they are within the ward. Yeah. Okay, other options within the ward.
Thank you.
So now if we could all vote on the amendment, all those in favour please show. Thank you, the amendment is carried. The motion as amended therefore takes place of the original motion. Do any members wish to propose any further amendments to that amended motion, which has now become the substantive motion? Would members now please vote on the substantive motion, i.e. the amended recommendation? All those in favour please show. The substantive motion is carried. We will now continue on to the next item on the agenda. Councillor Vincent, would you please introduce the report and propose the recommendations, which is item 10 for Members' Allowances Scheme?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's always somewhat problematic for members to be asked to vote on giving themselves a pay rise. But for the last however many years, I've been a councillor since 2007, the times when staff pay was frozen or increasing by small increments, the members' allowance scheme also increased by very small increments. So this year may look large, but the reason why it is as large as it is because we did a pay realignment for officers that meant that we caught up with our neighbours. So all this does is catch up with our neighbours. We should not be ashamed to be reimbursed for the hard work that we all do. It's not easy, it's long hours, and these are expenses that don't fully compensate you for the time. Nobody does it for the money, but equally it's nice to feel valued, and we should be valued because what we do is important. I happy to propose that, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for the proposal?
I'll second, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Are there any comments, questions or amendments? Councillor Duffy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you. Firstly, I would like to express the Labour Group's appreciation for the work undertaken by the Independent Remuneration Panel and thank them all for the input, time and effort spent on the reward. However, we feel at this time we should not be awarding ourselves an increase that is above the current rate of inflation, which is hovering around 2.5%. Therefore, I would like to put forward amendments to recommendations 3.1 and 3.3. 3.1 amended to read that the basic allowance paid to each councillor be increased by 2.5% from £4,911 per annum to £5,033 per annum, with effect from the 15th of May 2025, in line with inflation. 3.3 be amended to read that the annual sum paid to the Mayor and Deputy Mayor be uplifted by 2.5% in line with inflation. This is not simply gesture politics, as some councillors might be tempted to suggest. This is about doing what's right by the residents of the borough. The average UK wage increase for this year is forecast to be around 3.9%. However, we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that this is not a wage, but an allowance that we all receive. We are not staff. We are elected members and elected councillors. We should be making sure that residents' council tax is spent wisely as possible. Obviously, we are aware that individual councillors can decline to be paid allowances or other expenses, but that's not what we're asking councillors to do. We are simply asking that this council shows empathy with its residents at this time by not accepting any increases in their allowances above the rate of inflation. I therefore move that this council agrees not to increase the basic council allowance by anything above the current rate of inflation and that the allowance increase for 25-26 be set at 2.5%. Thank you.
Thank you. Rebecca Huddleston, would you please advise on whether or not the amendment is valid?
Yes, we can take the amendment which needs to be seconded.
Second.
Yeah, I'd like to second that amendment, please. And could I please also ask for a recorded vote on the recommendations, please?
So we need 4 people for a recorded vote, please.
It was.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So do any members wish to speak for or against the amendment? Councillor Vincent.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, the sentiment of it's fine, but it completely ignores the fact that for years the council's allowances and staff pay, which is what this is linked to, not inflation, because in the inflationary figure in September, which is approximately the one that Councillor Duffy is referring to, has absolutely no bearing on the pay award that this is linked to. Our allowances are not increased when staff wages are increased, and that's agreed about a year before they come in April, and then we follow it the year after. So we're catching up from about 2 years ago. And even then, Madam Mayor, this is to reflect the fact that we have given a pay boost to our members, our officers, as we say, so that we can actually make sure that they keep up. So this is linked to the pay of our staff. We don't link it to inflation, and the staffing pay rise isn't linked to inflation, because, to be honest, for years they would have been delighted if it was, and then our pay would have been a lot higher as well. So we can't just say on the one hand inflation's this so you can't go above it, but on the other then say, well, the staff aren't getting a pay rise in line with inflation, so we should not put our expenses up. It shouldn't be a race to the bottom. This is not us boosting our own allowances. This is us accepting the recommendation of the panel. So I would suggest that we vote against this and go with the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Duffy, as the proposer of the amendment, please could you respond to the debate?
I just can't believe you just said that. In one voice you're saying it's nothing to do with wage rises, but then you're comparing it to what the staff have had. It's not just a politics either. This is about people are struggling out there still because of 14 years of Tory rule, and we are just trying. We're not saying we don't deserve a rise, but what is wrong, excuse me, whenever anyone has spoken on your side tonight, we've been quiet. Anyone over here has been speaking. Those there, yes? Yes.
Oh, good.
Child.
Yes, ma'am.
We should not be interrupted like this. If you want to vote,
Can we just show some
double
respect
the
to the
rate of
chamber,
inflation,
please?
because that's what you're voting for, Councillor Vincent, then so be it.
So we'll now move to a vote on... Oh, sorry. To the main vote on the amendment. Those in favour, please show.
This recorded vote.
Rebecca Huddleston, would you please read out members' names for a recorded vote?
Sorry. So I'll read out the name of each councillor in turn in alphabetical order. When your name is called, would you please state how you wish to vote on the proposed motion, either for, against or abstain. Councillor Amos. Councillor Lady Dulcie Atkins. Councillor Sir Robert Atkins.
For.
Councillor Baxter. Councillor Beavers. Councillor Belshaw. Councillor Berry. Councillor Birch. Councillor Blair. Councillor Bolton. Councillor Bowen. Councillor Bridge. Councillor Cartridge. Councillor Catterall. Councillor Collinson. Councillor Duffy. Councillor Ellinson. Councillor Fayle. Councillor Fielding. Councillor Higginson. Councillor Higgs. Councillor Ibbison. Councillor Jackson. Sorry, I've got the wrong list. Councillor Kay. Councillor Marinell. Councillor Lee. Councillor Livesey. Councillor Martin. Councillor Meekins. Councillor Minto. Councillor Molyneux. Councillor Nichols. Councillor Rayner. Councillor Rendell. Councillor Rimmer. Councillor Robinson. Councillor Rushforth. Councillor Smith. Councillor Stevenson. Councillor Swatton. Councillor Swift. Councillor Thulis. Councillor Vincent. Councillor Walker. A. Walker. Councillor Seawalker. Councillor Wells. And who have I missed? Councillor Crawford. Sorry.
So we want to just double check with our numbers. If we could have a show of hands of all those 4, please. And a show of hands of those against, please. Thank you. So the amendment is lost, so we will therefore continue to debate the original motion. Would members now please vote on the recommendations? Those in favour, please show. Those against? Any abstentions? The recommendation is approved. The next item is item 11, Gambling Act Statement of Gambling Policy 25 to 2028. Councillor Berry, would you please introduce the report and propose the recommendation?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We're required to prepare and publish a gambling policy document every 3 years. No substantive changes have been made to the previous policy, and the document is basically a rewording and better presentation of the previous document. There's been the required consultation and it's been considered by our licensing committee. No comments or objections have been received. I therefore propose that we adopt this policy document.
Is there a seconder for the proposal? Are there any comments, questions or amendments? Would members please now vote on the recommendation? Those in favour, please show. That's unanimous. The recommendation is approved. The next item is item 12, periodic report. Lead member for children and young people. Councillor Kay, would you please introduce your report?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My report is before councillors. If you've got any questions, I'm happy to answer them. But just before you do, I'd like to thank Councillor Callum Baxter for his support while I was ill, and also for Shelley Birch, the officer for Wyre, who is invaluable to me. She supports me all the time with everything that's gone on and has done since I've come back, trying to get back into the role. So if you've got any questions, I'm here.
Councillor Wells, thank you.
Hi, thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, I'd also like to pass on my congratulations for the work that's been achieved, both by Councillor Baxter and yourself, Councillor Kay, particularly given the period of sickness absence that you've had. It's really wonderful to see the outreach work to children and young people in the area to try and involve them in democracy. It is a particular passion of mine as well. Therefore, as per paragraph 5.1, We note that you are talking about the various bits of work that you plan to do with various stakeholders, other people in the local area. The one thing that we would ask you to consider is other local councillors within this chamber, from this side particularly from the Wyre Labour Group. We've got educators within the group, people that are trained qualified teachers, youth workers, work with children and young people. So we just want to congratulate you, but also ask that there is a little bit more cross-party working on this area as we go forward. Thank you very much.
Councillor Kay, would you like to respond?
More than happy to work with everybody, for me, any party, because children are the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Rimmer.
Just to echo that it was really positive. I thought that children were consulted on the climate change, and that this is feeding into our strategic thinking. And in Presol, we're thinking more about how we involve young people, and so we'd be happy to be consulted on any future plans. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kay.
All schools are invited when we do democracy and to other things, and it's up to that school who can come along and attend. St Aidan's were invited, but unfortunately they hadn't got the staff in to be able to bring the children on the day. But we will always let you know, and you can always persuade or help to get funding to make sure the kids can get here, because we want them to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. The report is noted. The next item is item 13, Periodic Report Planning Committee. Councillor Rendell, would you please introduce your report?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Members have my report, and I'm willing to take any questions. However, I would like to place on record my thanks not only to all members of the Planning Committee for their contribution and support, but also to Steve Smith, the Assistant Director of Planning and Building Control, and his entire team. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions for Councillor Rendell? Councillor Higginson.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you to Councillor Rendell for this report. I notice once again this eye-watering statistic about how the percentage of planning applications dealt with under delegated powers. I suppose I ought to congratulate the planning department for reducing it from last year, because it was 97%. But these are not big strides, are they? Just an observation generally, particularly when we've got devolution on the table. When the Local Government Reorganisation Act was published in 1974, and this borough was formed, it really was a planning authority. It seems to me that it is in name only. Back in the day, before we had this dreadful cabinet system, we used to have a planning committee that actually served some useful purpose, shall we say, with all due respect to those that serve on this committee now. I can remember back in the 90s when I was on here, on the committee. I did 8 years, Madam Mayor. And back then, you were on the planning committee until recently, but back then, believe it or not, we used to do between 12 and 15 planning applications per meeting. It wasn't uncommon that we'd actually adjourn and reconvene so that the agenda could be completed. I think it's a sad reflection that we have such a low percentage of planning applications being dealt with by the committee. So I'd be interested to hear if the chairman agrees with these sentiments. But I urge all members of this council to try to make sure that planning applications do go before committee. I know it's our individual responsibility, but for heaven's sake, we're dealing with 2 and 3 planning applications, and of late, planning meetings have been cancelled. Cancelled due to lack of interest, it seems. So, whilst I welcome the marked improvement, they're not big strides, are they? I look forward to hearing what the Chairman has to say. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Rendell, would you please respond?
I find it difficult to respond to that sort of question, in inverted commas. The planning laws are totally different from what they were 8, 10, 20 years ago when Councillor was on the planning committee. I think also that the rules are much tighter now with respect to applications. Applications do have to be vetted and verified very carefully, and under those circumstances, within the rules that there are within the planning authority. And so I think that the days of having 13 and 14 planning applications coming in to committee are long gone. And yes, we have only had to cancel December's meeting. We have had 11 meetings during this last 12 months, and it was only the December meeting that was postponed, and that was because of one major application that was not completed in time to come towards to committee. Thank you.
Thank you. The report is noted. The next item is item 14, Mayor nominations for 25-26. As listed in the agenda, the Chief Executive has received 2 nominations before the deadline as set by Democratic Services via email. You will all be aware on 12th of September 2024 the Council agreed a revised selection process for the Mayor. Therefore, members are asked to consider the vote on the appointment of the Mayor at a meeting before the annual meeting. Before we move on with this item, I just have a few procedural matters to address. I propose that we temporarily suspend Procedure Rule 16 to limit the debate to discuss why each candidate is suitable for the position rather than not suitable. It will remain that members will have a maximum 5 minutes per speech. May I call for a seconder for this proposal? Thank you, Councillor Vincent. All those for, please. That's unanimous. That is carried. For ease, I'll ask that we discuss each nominee separately and then take a single vote. There must be a majority of votes for one nominee. In the order of the agenda, please can I ask a proposer for Councillor Catterall as the Mayor-elect for 25-26?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillor Catterall is a long-serving, experienced and hard-working councillor who also has 2 years' experience as Deputy Mayor. Sue would make a fantastic Mayor, and I hope that members will support her. She will have a great enthusiasm for helping the people across the borough, where the role of Mayor is still very important to people, particularly younger and older people. So I'm delighted to nominate Councillor Sue Catterall to be approved of the Council's formal nomination to be Mayor for the municipal year 25-26.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for the proposal?
I would like to second the nomination and proposal of Councillor Sue Catterall to be Mayor for 2025-2026. She's a very sociable person and enjoys meeting people, and will be able to easily engage with our residents and the various groups she will be visiting over the mayoral year. She knows the borough well, having been Deputy Mayor for 2 years, so she will know what she's taking on. I'm very happy to second the nomination of Councillor Catterall.
Thank you. Are there any other words of support for Councillor Catterall? Councillor Nichols.
I'll be brief. I think our current Mayor, Councillor Preston, will agree with me that we're both fairly quick-witted and used to speaking in public or dealing with groups of people. But notwithstanding that, we've both had a very hard learning curve during this year, and I feel with the political situation varying, I think we need a safe pair of hands for the next period rather than someone who's learning on the job. So as Councillor Catterall has done 2 terms recently as Deputy Mayor, I feel she's experienced enough to handle whatever comes her way, and I would certainly support her. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Are there any other words of encouragement? Can I now ask for a proposer for Councillor Brian Stevenson? Thank you, Councillor Fail.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillor Brian Stevenson was my election agent when I was first elected and was also my late father's agent for many of his elections. So it is a privilege to propose Brian to become the next Mayor of Wyre. Most of you are fully aware of Councillor Stevenson's background, so I won't say too much in support of his nomination for Mayor. However, living in Fleetwood, Brian will of course make a great advocate for the borough's largest town, but he's also lived in Great Eccleston, Poulton and Thornton-Cleveley, so I'm sure he will be able to, and indeed will, represent the whole of Wyre to the best of his ability. And of course, he has a wealth of experience as a councillor, 10 years as a councillor for Park Ward, and now in his second year as councillor for Warren Ward. I think Brian has been hankering after representing Warren for some time, what with it containing roads such as Hathaway, Shakespeare, Macbeth and Hamlet. It really is quite fitting. You might have gathered from Councillor Stevens' earlier speech that he is this council's very own bard, with his regular use of Shakespeare references in his speeches. Don't get too worried though, because I have it on good authority that if he becomes Mayor, he'll keep his regular use of Shakespeare references to a minimum. Brian was disappointed not to be appointed Mayor last year, but if he's successful this time, it will definitely be a case of all's well that ends well. I propose the nomination of Councillor Brian Stevenson as the next Mayor of Wyre for the municipal year of 25-26.
Thank you, Councillor Fayle. Is there a seconder for the proposal? Councillor Higginson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. What can we say about Brian? I've probably known Brian longer than many in this council chamber, and if it's not showing my age as well, I can remember when I first joined the Labour Party in the early 1980s. I think Walter Clegg was the MP, then I might be wrong, and I think the constituency was known as North Fylde. Brian would be able to correct me on that. Michael Foote was the leader of the Labour Party. I can't remember who was in Downing Street, but many people referred to that person simply as that woman. Brian was my election agent in 1987, the first time I stood for this authority when it was in the Preesall Road. I wasn't successful in those days, and I don't know if Brian remembers. He seemed to be struggling with travel sickness. He never came over the Shard Bridge once. And I seem to remember we had to meet in the thatched house over a pint to get the nomination papers signed, but I was to be successful some years later. Of course, many of us here know, don't we, his love of Shakespeare. Now, I don't profess to be knowledgeable about William Shakespeare, but Brian seems to think that he is, and sometimes I think even he gets mixed up with some of the quotations. Perhaps it is Much Ado About Nothing, or dare I say, Labour's Love's Lost. However, my taste personally with playwrights would include Oscar Wilde, who would have said that I can resist anything but temptation. My taste in playwrights are perhaps a bit more progressive. I like the likes of Alan Bleasdale and Mike Leigh and of course Ken Loach. But when it comes to writers, there's none better than George Orwell, or might I recommend Robert Tressel, the author of The Ragged-Trousered Philanthropist. And if you've never read this, I can certainly welcome it to you. Madam Mayor, perhaps that should be noted in the minutes, just for the record. Not necessarily the comments about Brian Stevenson, but definitely about the Ragged-Trousered Philanthropist. But being serious, I think that Brian, yes, he was somewhat disappointed last time, but the inspiration he gives us for someone that's 80-something, I think is quite remarkable. In his heart, he's more like 20-something. And I think this would be a real fitting tribute if you were to give him that nomination. So I have great pleasure in seconding the nomination for Councillor Brian Stevenson. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any other words of support for Councillor Stevenson? Councillor Beavers.
Thank you. I'd just like to say that Brian has been a servant of this borough for many a year. he was gravely disappointed last year when he wasn't appointed as mayor. It's always been done on the years of service. Brian is in his 80s. He's always been a wonderful, supportive friend to me, and I would like to support his nomination today to become the Mayor of Wyre. I think he deserves it. I think he's worked hard and long, and him and Evelyn will be absolutely amazing. I will be laughing all over the borough with you, Brian. But you take care.
Thank you. We'll now move on to the vote. As mentioned, there must be a vote for one nominee. So those in favour of Councillor Catterall, please show. Thank you. Those in favour of Councillor Brian Stevenson, please show hands. Can I ask if you can just put your hands up so we can clearly see them, please? I can confirm that a majority of the votes have been Councillor Catterall. Therefore, Councillor Catterall, you have been agreed as the Mayor-elect for 25-26 to be confirmed at the annual meeting in May. Thank you. The next item is item 15, notices of motion, which we have none. Therefore, I close this meeting and thank you all for attending.